a little bit different today. Now, those of you who watch my content religiously may remember that not too long ago, I uploaded a video debunking two people on polyamory, and recently an individual came to me with his own grievances with the video, as well as wanting to have a discussion from the perspective of someone who is in a true polyamorous relationship, and I thought it would be very interesting to do. So instead of a collab or anything, I decided to just set up a live stream. And I know a lot of people are wondering what that 6-second thing was all about. That was just me testing everything to make sure it works. I did not intend for that to get uploaded, and I couldn't figure out how to get it deleted. So I apologize about that. But I want to let my guest introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Evening, I'm Michael. That's it. That's all.
Okay, so getting to the discussion, like I said, I uploaded a video debunking two people who were making a video trying to defend polyamory and failing miserably, which I will leave in the description if I haven't already done so, if you haven't seen the video. But in short, it's the worst video I've ever responded to on my channel so far, and I thought it would be interesting to bring on the perspective of someone who is actually in a polyamorous relationship. And as those of you know, I actively like to seek out people whom disagree with me or believe in things that I disagree with, contrary to what some jackass YouTubers like to say. DX, I don't live in an echo chamber, and I actively love to discuss things with people that have nothing, that don't believe in the things I believe in. Sorry, this is a little bit different and unscripted, so I might stutter every once in a while.
Same.
So yeah, so I guess we'll go over some of the points in this video. Or if you don't want to start with the video, the individual, my guest, can explain like his own personal experience within his polyamorous relationship and why he believes that the two people in the video I responded to, Mag and Scorch, are not truly in a polyamorous relationship, and they are only using it as a sort of band-aid, as he put it.
I will say, like, first off, the video that you're linking everybody to, yeah, Scorch's audio is very horrible in that. There's just no way around it. It's very hard to make out what he's saying, and it's very hard to keep everything because it jumbles between them two. Like, her audio's fine, and the guy's audio is just horrendous, and it's not great. But okay, specifically, what goes into the video that I have a big issue with is they're trying to define their polyamorous relationship, but what their relationship is called is a triad. It's where everybody's in a polyamorous relationship with each other. So that means that in the video, there is a man and two women, and they're all dating each other. Whereas you can have versions of polyamorous relationships where, like, for example, my girlfriend, she has a husband, and I'm in no way in a romantic relationship at all with the husband. So we're not in a full polyamorous relationship in that regards. So they miscategorize themselves right off the bat, which is part of what I have a huge issue with.
Yep, and if those who remember the video, I pointed out that throughout the whole entire video, both sides contradict themselves and come off as hypocrites, and at one point of the video, the girl, Mag, contradicted herself within the same exact sentence, and what I find very funny is the girl in the video fully admits she did no research whatsoever. She has no goddamn clue what she's talking about and admitted this in her comment section. However, disappointingly, you can't see the shit show that is her comment section because her entire channel got deleted because she thought it would be a smart idea to be lazy and steal other people's content and then not expect something bad to happen to her.
That's what happened?
Yep, so her entire channel, because she would re-upload videos that were not her own, do nothing transformative with it, and now her channel's gone.
Yeah, I remember perusing through that channel. A lot of asses. It. Yeah.
So yeah, and I find it interesting is the reason why I find this so interesting is while you might disagree with me on polyamory, I find it funny, like Marx just said, that it's funny that even people who are in polyamorous relationships don't believe that those two are in a true polyamorous relationship, and even they disagree with them. It really says a lot, and I do genuinely believe that they are frauds, or like you said, they're using it to as a band-aid to cover up for past monogamous relationships, and it's not genuine.
Well, that's a later part in the video, and there's a bit to go through before we get to that.
Yeah,
But it's more
so I
so
guess
like
you go for it.
it seems that polyamory is a remedy to a problem rather than a natural course of like natural conversation. Because specifically, if they just if they remarked that this is a video, just our perspective on our polyamorous relationship, I wouldn't have that much of an issue. But they're going into defining it, and they use there's very technical terms for this, and they use things very liberally, and they talk in the abstract, which is a very conflicting matter. Like if they were more direct and they more defined in what they were talking about rather than just talking about their relationships, I would be fine. But like I said, there's like concepts of hierarchical structure, there's concepts of triad, and so forth and so on. There's a lot of terminologies that's in it that they don't use, which shows me a lack of not only their research but their understanding of what relationship that they're in.
Yeah. From the way I see things, it looks like she got all her information from the husband. That's what it seems like to me, because she did no research, so where else would she be getting this information from other than the husband and wife, who equally have had terrible arguments on screen and off screen?
Well, that's the other thing in a polyamorous relationship. You have versions of it where everybody's equal. And then you have a version of it which is hierarchical. You have somebody who is like mostly makes the decisions for the group. And from the way that I've seen it presented, it seems that Scorch, the individual in the video, he seems to have more of this control. If everything that I'm speculating about is true, I could be mistaken, but for example, there's a part in the video where he talks about like it's only like you have a family and then you bring people into that family and that constitutes polyamory, which is like it's not categorically correct.
Yep, and I had an issue with that. I even decided to pull out the technical definitions of family because admittedly I can be a little bit technical sometimes due to my more smart aleck side, but it seems that they just either used words incorrectly to come off as dishonest, or they would dilute the meaning of certain words to make it easier to digest. One of the biggest points I had is when Scorch said it never made much sense to him why you can't love more than one lover, and tried to use the example of, do you love your daughter? Well, if you can love more than one daughter, why can't I love more than one lover? And I explained why that's incorrect, because there are 7 different types of love. And as I explained in my video when I was debunking him, you do not love people the same way that you love others. I do not love my cat the same way that I love my lover. I do not love my grandfather the same way that I love my best friend Yushami. It just comes off as completely dishonest. It reminds me of those people that dilute the meaning of words like racism just so they can call people they don't like racist, and I have a huge problem with people that dilute the meaning of words.
Part of the issue there comes from they actually were going on to a good point before they divulged into something that didn't make sense. So if you were making the point that you can love people differently, then you would have a good point. Like, one example that I've seen does kind of come from the same area of like you have 2 kids. Which one do you love more? And usually people are like, I can't pick. It's because they love their each individual child differently. And if we're talking about like polyamory, it's not that you're sharing the same romantic love. You're not sharing the same intimacy with other people. You're sharing a different intimacy with that person. So the romance that I have with my girlfriend is different from what she has with her husband. And all parties are aware of this. There's full consent on board. And so we understand that it's not like me taking time or me taking intimacy from someone else. It's me sharing my own intimacy with her, and she has her own intimacy to share with me. There's a completely different dynamic going on.
And what I seem to gather from it is they seem to believe in polyamory from the perspective of equality. Everything is equal, and I had a huge problem with that. If they admitted that there is a little bit more of a hierarchy structure in their relationship, I could at least respect that. But the fact that they're delusional enough to believe that we are all equal and we give an equal amount of love, like I said in my video, it is an absolutely impossible expectation to be able to give both of your lovers, no matter how hard you try, an equal amount of love. Humans are too complex. It is impossible. If I can't even give equal love to my cat and my brother's dog that lives with us, what makes you think you can give equal love to two highly complex human beings that have their own interests, their own likes and dislikes, which even Mag in the video admits that they have things that they like that she dislikes, but she believes that they all come together to make each other a better person, but without actually explaining why this is. She just says, well, Scorch and Raven like My Little Pony, I don't, but me and Raven like cooking and Scorch doesn't, so somehow this makes us all a better person.
By the way, to answer the chat, this is StreamYard. Just to let you guys know. Yeah, there are plenty of easy comparisons in order to make about how you can share a complex relationship and other people in more of a broader sense. So like authority figures, like how would you like categorize an authority figure, for example? Like, sincere question.
Well, I guess my response to that would be it depends on the circumstances, because not to get too deep into it, but speaking from the perspective of someone who's an anarchist, I don't usually take too kindly to people who claim to have authority over me, in air quotes.
Yeah. But the first thing you came out with, you're like, it's very circumstantial.
Yep. Now, for example, if it's like I'm working at a company and I'm taking orders from my CEO, who's the leader of the company, that's one thing. Or if you have a person in war taking orders from their commander as to not risk getting life lost, then yeah, I would say sure, but it can all depend on who the authority figure is and why they're claiming to have authority over you. And I would say in the situation of a polyamory relationship, if you have people claiming to have authority over children that is not technically theirs, I don't care if you're all one big family or not, in air quotes, just because two parties decide to have a baby but the other one doesn't. I don't think it's fair for that third person in the relationship to have any kind of authority over the child, no more authority than what maybe a babysitter would have.
Yeah, we can get to children for a bit, because basically my idea is that you don't expect a child to like understand a polyamorous relationship. Like whenever I'm with my girlfriend and she has children, like we don't display affection in front of the kids, because we're not going to confuse them. Like once the kids get older, she'll tell them about it, like when they're teenagers and stuff, maybe. But who knows? It just like, is it something that needs to be brought up? Because like we're not trying to confuse the children. Like we obviously understand that she has a husband. And to divulge real quick, another technical term that they could have talked about is that whenever you don't have somebody that you're in a polyamorous relationship, you don't live with them both. The one you live with is called your nest partner. Your nest partner is somebody that you make your nest with, obviously. It's the person that you like roam your home life around. And for example, my girlfriend's husband, she's the one that is her nest partner. That is the one, of course, she is going to prioritize. She doesn't like the use of terminology, but there are portions of it where there's like primary and secondary. Like, she lives with him, she has kids with him. Like, of course, she's going to prioritize him if there is a problem. And there's like, we're in no delusion that somehow everybody's going to get equal time with every single thing. And that's why we don't compare it as in we're sharing like time and we're sharing romance. We're having a different kind of relationship. Polyamory in this instance is supposed to be, I share my individual relationship with my significant other, and it's different from how she does with her husband or how her husband does with his girlfriend.
Yep. Now, they don't mention this in the video. However, as far to my knowledge, right now, all three of them are living together. So I guess that's a situation. I don't know how it works out behind the scenes. I can only speculate. But I guess all three of them are nesting partners, which of course they don't bring up because they did no research. And I'm pretty sure all the husband and wife did was probably just Google what polyamory meant and say, yeah, that's fine. Let's go with that. What I find mostly insulting about this is because probably the most controversial point I made in my video and people still fight against me about is when I call polyamory cheating. And I do view polyamory as cheating to an extent. And I think that the whole we're consenting to it argument can only get you so far. Especially in this case where it's a married man and a woman dating someone who is not their spouse, which is the literal textbook definition of infidelity. And God forbid they ever have sex, which I'm pretty sure they have at some point because the boyfriend claims to be perverted. Well, guess what? Now you're getting into adultery, and they claim to be religious. So you'd think they would understand this, but they deny it.
That's fair. Just for detail, nobody in the relationship that we have, we usually call it a V relationship because me and the husband draw to her, but like me and the husband don't have a romantic relationship in one way or the other. And though the husband does have, like, he's seeking a girlfriend, I'm lazy. But the one of the issues, one of the problems that I have is that, like, obviously I don't view polyamory as cheating. And, like, my relationship, for example, my girlfriend got married through the court system, and she's not a very religious person. It's more so like, I think you could make kind of an argument on your behalf of, like, that seems more like a religious structure, right? Like, that's more so like, if you go to the courtroom, like, do you have to abide by Christian laws? Isn't Christian laws a bit overbiting in these kinds of systems within our, like, legal system and everything? Doesn't it seem kind of a bit authoritative in a sense?
Yeah, but as they say in the video, they're not actually religious, even though they claim to be, or at the very least, they don't follow what their religion says. So they just come off as a bunch of hypocrites. And as I said in my video, it comes off to me that they're only religious when it's convenient for them. Like when they used Bible verses to justify polyamory, except they cherry-picked verses from the Old Testament specifically, which, if you don't know it, is retconned. You know, like those things that happen all the time with comic books. So you shouldn't be using any information from that. And anyone from the Versus community will immediately know what I'm talking about. Retconned material is a huge no-no.
Yeah. So when it comes to these kind of things, Usually the definitions of adultery and stuff, they kind of fall under, in the same way that they do, fall under appeal to tradition fallacy. Like, they're appealing to tradition. It's just like, oh, okay, no, it just worked, so there's no, like, we don't really need to change it. We just need to keep appealing to it rather than, like, actually pull out the inconsistency here. And they have a huge problem with doing that. They use religion as a appeal to tradition rather than really go into the intricacies of it. Because if you wanted to have a conversation about culture, that would be completely fine. But they never do that in the video. They never divulge why these have different kinds of archetypes of what you could view as polyamory. But it's more so like for example, Muslim tradition, it's more so that the husband has a polyamorous relationship while all the wives just sort of are in a relationship with him. Because in order to be polyamorous, you need to have multiple relationships. So by that definition, usually the several wives wouldn't have a relationship with each other in the same romantic sense.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they wouldn't be.
Because, like you said, hierarchy. And in the Muslim culture, which is one of the only cultures where polyamory is widely accepted and institutionalized, it is hierarchy based. The husband has all the power, and the husband will oftentimes just divorce the wife whenever they damn well please.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're not really keeping yourself in good company. And they do allude to religions like Muslim in their video, but don't actually go into detail, which I start out the video explaining that. I wish I could have probably gone a little bit into detail in this in the actual video. I admit this, but this was before I understood the hierarchy side of polyamory. I did as much research as I could, and anyone who's interested, all my links are in the description of this live stream if you want to read any of them while listening. But yeah, it's very hierarchy based, and Muslim is one of the only cultures or religion, as far to my knowledge, in the entire world where polyamory and polygamory, or however you pronounce it, is widely accepted and normalized. However, my argument is polyamory should never be normalized. There should be some kind of social stigma around it.
So someone in the chat brings up the point about how it like, one of the main points that I bring out about this video is that there are a lot of technical terms such as triad, such as nest partner, and so forth and so on that is never used. And of course, you can get away with not knowing some things, but their relationship falls under a very specific definition of what you would consider polyamory. And at no point do they classify themselves correctly. And that shows this deep misunderstanding of polyamory as like a connective tool between people rather than like they're narrowing it very closely to specifically what their relationship is rather than how polyamory is as a concept, which is part of the biggest issue that I have, because they have a very specific polyamorous relationship that is ill-defined, whereas there's a bigger spectrum to deal with that than what they're showcasing at all. And because of that, the video is very, maybe not purposefully, but it is very dishonest in that case.
Yep, and that's what it comes down to. They are so the best case scenario is they're speaking from ignorance and have no clue what they're talking about. And the worst case scenario is they're being intellectually dishonest to justify their controversial lifestyle. However, given the responses they've gotten in both comment sections, because the husband did pay a YouTuber to promote this on his YouTube channel, which was significantly larger than his girlfriend's YouTube channel, which I found to be a little bit odd. I don't know why you would feel the need to promote that, but in the comment sections, they were pretty much ripped to shreds because they just come off as two people trying to justify a controversial lifestyle. None of it came off as genuine. I go over this in the video that they don't actually care about adding to the topic of polyamory. It was all about them and their relationship. They say that the point of the video is just to define what it is and debunk some misconceptions, and they don't do that. Or when they try to, they fail miserably.
Yeah, they define their polyamory. They very much they showcase the video as like a general definition, which is that's obviously not the case here. They are talking about their relationship. I wouldn't have a problem with the video if their video strictly just said, this is our viewpoint of our relationship, and we're not speaking on behalf of what polyamory is categorically. But like I said, there's a lot of things such as Scorch brings up no favoritism within their relationship. But there is very obviously, like I said, there's a concept called primaries. Like if you have a husband and if you have a boyfriend, like you're very obviously going to prioritize the husband because that's the person you built your life with. Whereas that could have been a fine counterpoint to say that we don't do that. We instead we decide to build a structure of a home, a foundation based on 3 people rather than 2, because we trust enough to do that. But they never take that time in the video in order to find that contrast of what could be a good point to definition, to bring out a definition that is very important to understanding the dynamic of this. So arguably their video is more hurtful because it showcases polyamory to be only one thing rather than what poly conceptually can be.
And it's very hurtful because, again, they're using the concept of polyamory for their own selfish purposes, which is why I felt the need to respond to the video, even though technically it was such a tiny and insignificant video and flew under the radar, so much so that even you told me that don't worry about her video. It's so tiny and insignificant. It's obviously no one takes them seriously. But I noticed in her comment section, she was able to convince one person of this nonsense. And the fact that she was even able to convince one person of this nonsense, as dishonest as they were, is slightly concerning to me.
Yeah, it's very much like they're using their own circumstances to try and use it as an appeal of what it is, like what poly is. Based on the definition.
It's an anecdote, but even anecdotal evidence is bullshit and not true evidence.
Yeah. Well, like I said, one of the big things is they don't do things like they don't define what primaries are. They don't define what the relationship.
I don't even know what primaries even are.
Maybe.
They seem to think it's all about equal love, which, again, I'm going to say this right now. This is a little bit of an unpopular opinion of mine, but equality is bullshit, okay? You can try to say you want equality all day long, but equality has far more dark connotations than you possibly realize if you actually look deeper into it. If everyone in the relationship gets an equal amount of love and everyone is equal, then no one in the relationship is special. There is nothing special about the individuals in the relationship because the husband and wife is not allowed to have any sense of favoritism. But what I find funny is Mag says that, oh, there is no favoritism in polyamorous relationships, and in the exact same sentence, she says, sure, there's favoritism, but, which is probably the worst part of the entire video, because it's like, how do you contradict yourself in the same sentence? Even Scorch didn't frickin' contradict himself this badly. Like, it's pretty bad to contradict yourself in the same sentence. So, like I said in my video, is there favoritism or is there not favoritism? Which is it?
And that is something like, okay, so one of my major issues with video so much wasn't there. Like I said again, if it was just their opinion, that'd be one thing. But it's clear that they're trying to create a very... They're trying to showcase themselves as bringing out the knowledge and the facts about the relationship, but really all they do is define their relationship, but they showcase it as though they speak for polyamory in general, which I have a huge problem with, because even if you don't agree with it, there's a much more richer discussion to have in terms of like how people interact. When I brought up authority figures before, polyamory sort of can work in a more broader sense than just romance. So, like for a child, who does he see an authority figure as, and how does he categorize them? How does the individuals that child sees, how do they categorize them as different types of authority figures? Of course, he wouldn't treat them the same. He would treat them based on his own or her own different interactions with that authority figure. And polyamory, in the sense of what it is in romance, would be the same thing. Because this is part of what the big issue is that not only is this a very narrow description of what one kind of polyamorous, like romantic relationship would be, but it's more so they don't really talk about how different people can have a very like what you would categorize as like a same kind of romance, but in all honesty, and this goes back into what they were saying about favoritism, like of course you would favor one thing over somebody over the other. Like you have parts that you really enjoy about them. Like you don't have just one friend. You have several friends.
Like if I can't give an equal amount of love and attention to my friends, you sure as hell can't do that with multiple lovers, which is why I leave a list in the video of very complicated issues that happen in polyamorous relationships that, of course, they don't address. And whenever you show this to someone who supports polyamory, they immediately get intimidated and back off, which says to me that even people who support polyamory can't counter these points. And if they can't counter those points, then I'm sorry, you've lost the argument at that point.
It's not so much like anybody's being so much hurt by the video that I have a problem with. It is that it is a categorical error. It is philosophically and definitionally wrong, because what they're doing is they're creating what their situation is as the point of which other polyamorous relationships must be defined by. For example, there's a part in a video where he talks about opening the marriage. And the way that it's worded, it makes it sound as though he's saying, our relationship, like our marriage isn't open. We just invited a third person in. I'm like, well, no, like opening your marriage is to invite more people into the dynamic of what the marriage is. That is the major point here. And that's part of the reason what I had a problem with the video, is that it isn't about defining what poly is. It's about defining their relationship. But when they put the moniker of we're bringing out what we believe to be like, this is the misinformation that we're clearing up. We're just trying to bring out to light of like these misconceptions. That is not the purpose of the video. And part of the problem that I take umbrage with that is part of it, it's just wrong. But two, it's that there's a very big issue when you have a lot of people that stigmatize this kind of thing, and you're not even defining appropriately what your relationship is.
They're basically just making it worse, because people will use that type of video because they try to say that it's an informative video. They will ignorantly send it to someone to try to defend their polyamory, and all they're going to do is confirm that person's suspicions. Because yes, I understand that there is a stereotype that people who are in polyamorous relationships are just cheaters that don't give a damn. And that is a very hurtful stereotype. And even I can admit that. And I don't even take polyamory seriously. I think it's an absolute joke. But I can see the harm in spreading misinformation, and that's why I made a response to the video, because I don't like when people spread misinformation of any kind. I made this perfectly clear in any of my trap videos. I am sick and tired of people spreading misinformation about traps, because then it just leads to some people reinforcing stereotypes like traps are just transphobic stereotypes, or they're just guys dressing like girls to get dick, which is, of course, false. So I can relate to you in that aspect of stereotypes that are not true, and dumbasses like this making the situation worse, kind of like in Trap situation, where we have to deal with dumbasses like Pedantic Romantic that spread misinformation about traps, and now we got to deal with all kinds of hostile transgenders that want to wipe us from existence because they actually think we are a threat to their lives.
Well, okay, so part of the thing, also about the video, is that directly, if you watch the video, if anybody in the chat watches the video, they directly ask if they got anything wrong to respond to it. So essentially, they asked for this kind of interaction. They asked for other people to talk about it. Because let's say even if we disagree, like me, you, all of them, everybody just disagrees about it. At least we're having a discussion about it, and at least we're coming to like a consensus of what defined terminology is.
Because I actually
that's a big
want
issue.
to add to the conversation. That's why I'm doing this. I want to add to the conversation, and I wanted to give another main reason why I'm doing this, and I mentioned this in our PM, but I am having him on because admittedly I'm a tiny channel, but I like to give people platforms for whatever the reason may be. I wanted to give this individual a platform to defend polyamory, not defend himself and his relationship, but defend polyamory so we can add to the discussion rather than taking away from it like these two fools clearly are and only making the situation worse. There's another person I know who refers to himself as Raven. He believes that they are also in a fake polyamorous relationship, and they are spreading misinformation because it's not just you. My friend Raven said that, oh yes, absolutely, this is extremely harmful to people in polyamorous relationships. They're spreading misinformation. They don't properly define it. Their relationship is complete nonsense.
It's not even that. It's like, I'm not even here to defend polyamory. I'm just here to have a discussion about how we have to settle on certain kinds of terminologies and rules when it comes to how we define it. Because that's something that the video lacks, and that's something that the video inadvertently damages the capacity to do. It's a small video. Not a huge community of people have seen it. But the fact of the matter, it is part of the conversation. It's part of the greater conversation of what people are having about this dynamic. But in the video themselves, they ask if we get anything wrong, please respond to it. And they very obviously made a lot of errors when it came to defining not only polyamory in general, but their own relationship, which shows me that there's a very clear misunderstanding of what they're trying to portray to other people. And again, there's nothing wrong with being wrong, but when it comes to trying to define things and not use specific terminology, it's a huge issue. It's like if you use postmodernism in the abstract, but there's a very technical term for that in philosophy. It's that form of, we just need to understand we're all on the same kind of playing field when it comes to terms and what we're talking about, because then we can have a helpful and constructive conversation. Because even if we have terms that we need to debate about, we have to start there. But that would have been a terrific time in their video to bring up things such as proper terminology and to flesh out concepts such as, like, yes, there's a favoritism, but the favoritism I like is like, okay, my wife, she cooks better. I really like that about her. But that doesn't mean you turn to your second wife and say, well, she sucks at cooking and I hate her. No, you love something else about her. So the dynamic that you would have with like a 30-person relationship is that you would appreciate the person based off their own soul factors. And that could have been a huge part of their video that they could have focused on. That could have been a strong portion to even validate their triad relationship, but they don't do that. And in order to set records straight and to really settle on terminology, like that's why I personally would have liked to, and I have come on to discuss it, because there's a major issue with that.
One of my only regrets is I wish I could invite these two individuals on a stream and let them explain themselves, like maybe it was just a poorly made video. But since one of them isn't a big fan of me for whatever reason, I am not allowed to be in contact with that person, which is unfortunate because they do say, please make your own video. We would love your response. And then when I tried to respond to them, they weren't very happy about it. In fact, when I left a comment in the comment section of the video on Two Senses channel, I just flat out got told fuck off by the maker of the video, clearly showing off her maturity.
Yeah. And the point that Marx makes, by the way, I really like Kirby. I really like that. The biggest problem with polyamorous relationship is there will be favoritism. Yeah. And that's part of the thing that could have been elaborated in the video in order to make things flow a little bit better with making an understanding. Like, if you have two kids, you like one thing about one of them more than the other, but that doesn't mean that you like somehow inadvertently hate the other child for it. You're just like, oh, he's very nice and polite, but the other one's like really creative and really affectionate. Like, you have things that you adore about other people. And like going back, you have several, like most people have several different friends because they really appreciate individual aspects of different people. And because people decide to elevate that to a romantic thing, I mean, one, like what I'm like minding my own business. We're minding our own business. I don't see why other people are really bothered by it. But the other thing is that most of the time when it comes with a healthy polyamorous relationship, for example, me and my girlfriend, like we have no illusions that somehow this is just going to last forever and everything's going to be perfect. One day we're probably going to be like, we can't have a romantic relationship anymore. And then we would have to just be friends rather than explore any kind of romance. And so at that point, like we understand that there is an unhealthy way to believe that everything's just going to be perfect. Everybody's going to be treated the same and everything's just not going to have an area of discussion. Like that's not the area that we live in. We understand that, yes, like we appreciate things more than each other. And then we also understand that not everything's going to go like fantasy life. Not everything's going to be absolutely perfect. Like there is a pragmatic way of looking at this all.
And the individual Scorch actually makes the delusional argument of thinking that it will last forever, because here is his logic, and this was something he said on his Twitter. You might be able to possibly find it if you look, but he said simply this: if I can be happy with one person for 10 years, why can't I be happy with another? So he already seems to be under the delusion that he can love more than one person for 10 years, but makes the grave error of mentioning that they did this because they felt something was missing in their marriage, which is actually a huge red flag. I leave a link about this in the description that any therapist or marriage counselor will tell you. If you say there's something missing in their marriage, there is something wrong with your marriage and you need to fix it immediately. But I really wish I could have asked the husband this, but I can't. But I really wish I could have, because I want to know what his mindset is of, okay, you feel something is missing in your marriage, so you immediately go to, we both need to date someone. Why? Why not maybe what you just need is a child. Like, you were married for 10 years. Maybe you just needed a child. Why do you go straight to, oh, we need to date someone else? To me, that says a lot about the husband and wife.
Yeah. So, one, his point about, see, he has a proper setup for an argument or a point, but he falters near the end. Like, you can love people differently. Like, if you say, oh, I've loved someone for 10 years, why can't I love someone else? It's like, well, you can. He sets it up as, I'm loving them the same way.
And that's what he believes.
And that's, well, I mean, I do get that impression from the video, and that is something I fundamentally disagree with. Because more so what it comes from polyamorous relationships within the wider community, it's that we love each other for different reasons, and we extend things like romance to that, and some people don't. And there are categorical difference between like different loves, as somebody would say, like, you don't love your wife the same way you love your child, and that's actually one of the biggest points for polyamory. It's that you love people in different degrees.
Exactly. And here's what I don't get. They don't understand that favoritism is actually a part of our human nature, which I don't really understand. Like it is because of favoritism that we even have something as simple as your favorite movie, your favorite video game, your favorite pet, your favorite type of food. You have favoritism. You like something more than another. So it is impossible to remove favoritism from your mind, because in order to do so, you have to directly say that I am going to go against my literal human nature, which is pretty much impossible. You would have a better chance of killing yourself and coming back to life than going against your human nature.
Well, yeah, and that's what polyamory is about. It's about appealing. Well, it's not so much appealing. It's about exploring that. It's about not saying we want to share the same love between everybody. We understand, like most people in polyamorous relationships understand that that is not the point. The point is, can I extend and explore my love that I have for someone else in a healthy way? Because my love that I have for someone else, like I have a husband, but my boyfriend I love, but I love for different reasons. Like, my girlfriend doesn't love me for the same reason she loves her husband. She loves me very much specifically for me. It would be weird for her to love me like her husband because I'm not her husband. That would be part of the issue and part of like the categorization that isn't filtered out through the video. As for going on and to really like hammer down, like every time at the end of the video when they talk about religion, they're appealing to tradition. When it comes to that, it's not because those, especially with the Muslim example, that is a good example of how it is a structural thing rather than an interaction between people, and that is wholeheartedly a different kind of several people being in a relationship. That is a form of poly that is more structural rather than social. There is a way bigger discussion to have with that.
Yep, and real quick before I forget, I wanted to address something real quick that Bit Anime in the chat said. Why is it wrong if they're consenting to it and nobody is getting hurt? Why is polyamory a problem? And I've already debunked this argument before, but I guess I'll have to debunk it again. Okay, so let's say you have a mother and a son, and they decide to enter a consensual relationship. They're not hurting anyone, they're consenting to it, so what's the problem? See how easy it is to use that logic to justify things? It's a very bad type of logic to use because it's already being used by people who engage in incest and pedophilia. So good to see you're keeping yourself in good company.
So, like, one of the areas that it comes with that issue with polyamory is that My belief is that as long as everybody's a consenting adult, if everybody is aware of everything, and if everybody is like an active participant in it, it's fine. Because like for some reason, people automatically conflate things like polyamory with like cuckoldry, for example, which those are like definitionally two different things. It's just one example. A lot of what comes down to polyamory that makes people uncomfortable and not willing to have a conversation about it only comes down to sex, and it comes down to how like the other people interact, which is there's never conversations about, you know, how did it start? There's never discussions about, you know, why did you guys decide to have the relationship? Why did your husband like consent to it? Like for my example, and let's go off the logic about how polyamory is cheating, for example. So when I got into a relationship with my girlfriend, the one who said that she should date me was her husband. So who cheated?
Yep,
Like, genuine question. Who cheated? Who cheated?
and that's the interesting thing about it. Now, from my perspective, I say, especially in regards if you're marrying. Now, I will say this to be a little bit fair towards polyamory. If you are not married, I can somewhat be a little bit lenient. But if you are married, like the individuals in this video, then I'm sorry, you are completely fucked in the head if you're going to sit here and marry someone and say, oh, that's okay. No, when you marry someone, you're supposed to be married to that individual until the day that you die. It's supposed to be a promise. Now, while we can debate all day, like, is marriage a political right, a religious service, or whatever, here's what it comes down to. It's supposed to be a promise that you make to someone, that you will love them and only them because you love them so much that you don't want to be with anyone else.
Well, yeah, and that's why I bring up that question. If marriage is specifically a promise, and in my case, the husband asked for his wife to date me, and she's the one acting out the dating with me, who cheated? If we're going off of that logic, if marriage is a promise, then who cheated in that instance? Because the husband was the one who took the initiative, but the wife is the one who acted, but the husband is the one who came up with the notion before the wife. They both consented to it, so who cheated?
And that's what it comes down to. Polyamory is far too complex, and this is why I find it insulting how people like to try to break down polyamory to be simplified. You can't simplify polyamory. You cannot simplify love. Love is one of the most complex emotions of all time. It is not something you can simplify, and if you try to simplify it, you are a fool, plain and simple.
Hold on one moment. I had to get another beer. So yeah, it has a sort of basis in that. Like, polyamory can be complex depending on how you interact with other people. But if the main tenet here, the really big part of the conversation, is that polyamory is how you love people differently, and you take that to its logical like extreme, is that a problem? Like, if people in a regular monogamous relationship both say, I want the husband or the wife to figure out how far they can go into a relationship with this other person. Again, it has to go down to me asking who cheats in that situation, because there has to be one. Usually there's only one cheater in that situation. Now, if you tell me that they both cheated, I would have to know why. And what part of agency did they have? Because yes, it gets complex if you constantly try to portray it as there is constant favoritism, there can only be one. But with polyamory, it's about loving people differently.
And here's where I would put it. Going back to their logic of equality, okay, if you want to play the equality card, then guess what? You're all equally cheating. How's that sound? Now, obviously, it's not that simple, but that's kind of like a fair logic to bring up. Now, again, admittedly, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but here's what I would say. If the husband and wife are going on dates with Mag separately or at the same time, all three of them are cheating. If they are having sex, they are cheating. If they are acting on doing things with this girl outside of their marriage, they are cheating.
You mean being unfaithful?
Yep, cheating, being unfaithful, to me, it feels like it's basically like the same thing, and that's what it kind of comes off as to me. And what I find really, really convenient, and I won't go into too big a detail about this, but let's just say the Mag girl, she has a history of cheating. So that comes off as a little bit suspicious to me, and I genuinely wonder if the husband and wife are either really stupid or really delusional, that they would say, yeah, let's bring this person who has a history of cheating into our relationship and see how that works out. Like, to me, that would be a huge red flag. Like, I know that they were searching for someone for 7 years, but like, literally just look for literally anyone else.
So real quick, do you categorize being unfaithful and cheating as the same thing?
To an extent, yes. Like I said, if there is no marriage involved, there can be a little bit of leniency. Like, for an example, there is a certain type of polyamory that I can accept to an extent called an open relationship, which is where it's just multiple people having sex, which to an extent I can kind of understand. Like, if you're just meeting up with multiple people to have sex, while I wouldn't say it's a smart idea, technically it's like, who the hell cares, really? But once you start getting like romance and marriage involved, then I would say there's a little bit of a suspicion going on right there.
So what about swingers? Where do they sit within this area?
Swingers, now admittedly, I didn't do as much research on swingers as I did in other things because they didn't bring up swingers in the relationship. So I don't know. I didn't feel it felt relevant, so I didn't do as much research as I probably would have if it was relevant. So you might have to go a little bit more detail as to like what swingers are and why you feel they're a little bit relevant.
Well, because like if we take the definition of what you feel to be cheating, then swingers are usually couples. They can or cannot be married. That's not important to them being categorized as a swinger. Swingers are generally people within just a regular monogamous relationship that go out and just have sex with other people, group wise. So
basically just an open relationship. It's just another word for an open relationship.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I guess like, sure, but it's still, I wouldn't really advise it. I mean, admittedly, I have engaged in like a little bit of open relationship stuff before in my past. However, it's not really something I would encourage. Like, I guess if you're just like really, really sexual, sure, I guess. But if you're trying to get involved in a serious relationship, I wouldn't advise it. And while I can accept open relationships to an extent, like I said, I tend to draw the line in the case we're constantly calling back to with Mag and Scorch, where we have two people who are married dating someone outside of their marriage, which I find to be very scummy. And one thing I find convenient, to kind of go back to your hierarchy argument, apparently the reason why they were searching for a girl specifically was because the husband had no desire to ever be with a man because he isn't gay, which comes off as a little bit odd to me because it's because the wife has to be bi. Now, I don't know if she was always bi or she had to become bi for the relationship to work, but that kind of comes off as a bit odd if the wife has to possibly consent to a type of sexuality that she may not be comfortable with just to fulfill his desire of having another girl to screw around with. Which kind of shows off the more hierarchy side that it seems like the husband seems to have the power here.
All right, there's a bit of a jump that goes on there because we don't know exactly the reasoning to why, like, a girl was chosen. Like, that's, to me, that's a jump. Like,
Well,
you can
no,
have that
we
opinion.
actually know because it was someone asked this in one of her comment sections. If her videos weren't deleted, I'd bring it up. But she explained that the reason why, because someone asked her, she said it was because the husband Scorch had no desire to be with a guy. He doesn't like being with guys because he's not gay.
All right.
That's it. That's the literal explanation. There's nothing more to it than that.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying that, like, there's implied maliciousness here, which I'm not fully on board with yet. I don't know them enough, but
Yeah, I mean, neither do I. I mean, I know Mag a little bit because she has been on my YouTube channel before in the past, and we did used to be close friends until she decided to go insane and start throwing away all her friends.
Hmm.
But I do know a little bit about her, but as for the husband and wife, I don't know very much about them at all, so I can only imply so much.
Sure, but part of what I have an issue with their hierarchical structure, again, like, the main thing is they don't classify it as it because that would be just useful information. But the other thing that comes from it, and it's something you touched on before, is they specifically, well, Scorch specifically, because the wife isn't in the video. The Scorch specifically says something was missing. Now, maybe this is me. Maybe I'm looking too much into it. When I say something is missing, I don't find a person. Like, already that implies that it's like, oh, I need something to fix my relationship. What thing is that? It's like, it's that person. I wouldn't classify that person as a thing. But if you were to say that there was a dynamic, there was a feeling of connectivity that wasn't fulfilled, we could have a better argument about that. But saying that something is missing in your relationship, not there is something that you want to explore, is what I have a problem with, because it very much seems like they're trying to use polyamory to band-aid a problem in their relationship. And maybe that just comes off wrong. Maybe that just comes off very, very harsher than it needs to, but
Well, it's just you get what you put out there. This is why it's a good idea to make yourself very clear in your video and not be vague in a 6-minute video. Like, I know some people felt that me having a video responding to them being 50 minutes long was unnecessary. It was 50 minutes long for a reason. It's because I had to explain certain concepts and certain things about polyamory that they don't bother to explain. Like, sometimes a video is long for a good reason. You can't always break down everything into just a short little 5-minute video. And when you do, you end up with this. You end up with very fast editing to the point where you can't even understand what either side is saying. Because like quick, get it out there, explain everything in the most basic way possible. Don't provide any facts or evidence. Just quickly go. That's what it kind of feels like to me.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you didn't in no point in the video, in your video, did you categorize them as triad, which very early research into polyamory will show you that. I'm just being fair here.
Admittedly, that was something I kind of screwed up on. I was putting a lot into my script, and I had to keep constantly editing it.
No, you were deconstructing their conversation. You see, my issue with your video, for example, is that you weren't correcting them, you were debunking them. And which is fine, but I feel like there's a healthier discussion to have whenever we can come to an understanding rather than just saying that either side is just blatantly wrong and there's nothing else to it. Like, for example, yeah, they had a decent point in their video where they would say that, you know, you would love your child, you would love your wife. If they were to elaborate that into you love people differently, and that's the basis of polyamory, like I love my wife and I love my girlfriend in different ways, that would be a completely, I think, fair. Like, you could argue if that's like something you agree with, but that's like a fair argument to make. That's like cohesive. You can understand that, but they sidestep that. You know, they play a lot into favoritism. They play a lot into how, you know, everybody, the specific term, phrase that they use, we're all the same person, as a joke, and that comes off very uncomfortable as a concept because they say it's portrayed as a joke, but literally the only thing that they're like, oh, I have favoritism, that they show in the video is saying how, like, one side likes to debate, one side likes to cook, one side likes to watch a certain show, and
It's
it's
very
like,
simplified. It comes off as shallow, like they have a very shallow understanding of polyamory. And admittedly, my video wasn't perfect. I was researching a lot of different stuff, constantly editing my script, and yeah, there were certain things I could have gone into better detail about. But yeah, a lot of what you're saying is right, and that's why I'm doing this now, because I felt that, because here's the thing, the original video was actually almost an hour long, so I had to cut some stuff out of the video, and it's possible that some of the stuff that got cut out of the video was some of the information you felt was important, and admittedly, I could have gotten a little bit cut happy, but the video came out much longer than I anticipated, so that's why I'm doing this live stream, to kind of go over the stuff that should have been addressed, but I wasn't able to.
yeah, and
And you are right, because just simply saying that we're all the same person, that is a very disturbing mindset to have. That is a hive mind mindset. And I'm sorry, but people who have a hive mind mindset are absolutely horrifying. Like, this may seem odd to bring up, but in Resident Evil 5, the Ouroboros zombies, they were a hive mind structure of zombies. So that's basically, like, even if she only meant it as a joke, it was a very disturbing joke, and just makes her come off as far more disturbing than she probably ever intended. Because again, hive minds are scary, and Resident Evil kind of does a good job of explaining why hive minds are fucking horrifying, because you have all these people, all these monsters being controlled by one mind, the mind of Albert Wesker.
I mean, I would even say just a cult.
Yep,
Because
exactly.
they use religion. Yeah, they
Cults
use
have the
religion.
same mindset, and it's very, very disturbing, and it doesn't help that Mag on her Twitter will admit that, yeah, I lost my sanity, or I'm a self-proclaimed dumbass. It's like, why would you say this stuff about yourself? Like, I could admire you being honest, but it just makes you come off as a very disturbing individual.
Mm-hmm. Some of the things, they have something of, they state more is better in the conversation, and that's another
that was
thing.
one of the biggest things I had a problem with, which I refer to as more syndrome.
Mm-hmm. In polyamory, it is understood that usually, like, my girlfriend has no desire to get with anybody else rather than me and her husband, because it's not about having more, it's about having like a deep,
it's about
connection
having
with
something
somebody.
different, right?
Well, it's about having something that's like a genuine connection, and it's not so much that it's different, it's saying that the reason I bring up different is to say that we're not loving each other the same. And it's not that she's missing anything in her marriage. That wasn't the point at all, because again, her husband was the one that said, hey, you should date this guy. So that wouldn't even work out logically, because he had an active role in who got to do that. So It wasn't even her mindset.
Like,
It's to say that it's not to have more, it's just to explore a deep connection with someone
like
else.
I'll be very fair. Let's say I'll actually play my own personal devil's advocate and bring up some examples of polyamory that I could support, even though under normal circumstances I would never support polyamory ever, even in these given circumstances. But I'll play my own personal devil's advocate. Let's say you have a couple that's been together for a very long time and they've been married, and maybe they end up in a accident and they end up crippled, and the person doesn't want their lover to miss out on life, so they say, hey, go find yourself someone that you can date and do activities with that I can't do because I am unfortunately crippled. We'll still be together. You'll just be able to do the things you want to do with this person that you can no longer do with me. While I wouldn't say it's an ideal situation, I could understand the perspective of where those individuals are coming from. Or let's say that you've been together for a long time and the husband, hypothetically, like his sex drive is no longer working. Like he can't get it up like he used to, and he encourages his wife to go find someone who can fulfill your sexual desires because I physically don't have the ability to do so without drugs or something like that. Like, yeah, they're very unfortunate circumstances, and people who are truly in love should be able to work out these problems without having to bring in other people into the relationship. But in these situations, I could sympathize with these people and understand why they would come to this mindset, because they're not thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their lover, the person that's important to them. And I don't get that vibe from Mag, Scorch, and the wife. It seems to be very much, it's more about them rather than their so-called group.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. The two examples, but by the way, the first example you brought up is just Larry Flint, who made Hustler magazine. That's exactly the situation. But the two examples that you have pertain to physical intimacy. And through our conversations and stuff, you seem to have a focus on that when it comes to discussion about polyamory. And it's not entirely invalid, because in order for polyamory to have a valid argument of why it is a perfectly natural relationship, is because we value things differently. Like, it's the main thing that me and my girlfriend share is our interaction, and our interaction is going to be wholeheartedly different because we're just two different people. Whereas in, like, her interaction with her husband is a whole different interaction because it's her and her husband. It's the relationship between the people that create that difference. And like, we live in separate states, for example. Like, it's a long distance relationship, so
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not a
That's another
constant
situation where I could understand polyamory to an extent. However, in this case where it's three people living together, I would say, yeah, no, unacceptable. But in your case, if it's a long distance relationship, absolutely, I could understand. I mean, even I could admit my current lover has done this to where he admits that currently we're in a long distance relationship, though planning to move in together. He admits that he is okay with me finding certain people to fulfill my sexual needs because he knows I have a very high and potent sex drive, if my numerous jokes on my YouTube channel aren't evident of that. But while I'm not like the most comfortable with it, I can understand where he's coming from. He understands I have needs and he can't fulfill them at the moment, so he believes that I should engage in an open relationship at least until we're living together, which admittedly I do sometimes do every once in a while, although I still don't think it's very fair to him, because basically that time that he would have with me is being taken away from him and being given to someone else. Like,
well.
that's how I view polyamory. You're taking time away from one person, and if you foolishly think you can give the same amount of time to two people, then you are delusional. Inevitably, someone's time is going to be taken away from another.
But that's part of the discussion is that if we all talk about it, then it's like, hey, I want to hang out with my husband tonight. Like we can all hang out. And I'm like, oh, that's fine, and that's totally okay as long as everybody's okay with it. And you have different levels of values of which you prescribe it to be okay. Like you just said that you have needs and you would like them to be fulfilled, and both parties, you and your partner, decide, well, it's okay for you to go out and seek physical intimacy. And so there's a certain basis there that just says that, yeah, that by itself constitutes a form of polyamory itself. So you kind of interact in a polyamorous relationship yourself. So
Admittedly, though, here's the issue about it, though. These experiences almost always tend to feel very hollow. In one case, I just felt hollow and depressed throughout the entire experience, and I didn't even care. Like, I'm just like, you know what? I don't care because mindless sexual experiences are just very unsatisfying. This is why it's more important to do these things with someone that you love rather than having the dumbass logic of, oh, let me just bring in another person and that will make it better somehow. No. I mean, that's how I
but
see it.
that's the nature of my relationship with my girlfriend. It's not that we just physically are just completely enamored and we just want to fuck each other all the time. We really care about our time with each other. In the same way that I would care about to an area of romance. And it's like,
I mean, it's just very foolhardy to me. And one thing that's kind of interesting is that in libertarian and anarcho capitalist philosophy, favoritism is a kind of big thing, but not just that. Another thing that's interesting about anarcho capitalist and libertarian philosophy is subjective value. We have an understanding that everyone values things differently to each other. So, what I find as valuable, you could find as worthless. This is why wanting to ignore favoritism is a very stupid thing to do.
no. Well, the thing is that when it comes to polyamory, looking at it from the same kind of like area of philosophy, rather than looking at it at a sense of we only, it's an on and off switch. We only like people. There's certain degrees to it. Like, I like this person this much, so I keep them at kind of an arm's length. I like this person a lot more. Like, they're a good friend of mine. I trust this person even more. Like, I let them borrow money, like, if they need it. And I like this person a lot, and I have like an intimate relationship with them. Is it so difficult to understand that with a lot of people that don't agree with polyamory, that every person interacts with polyamory into the degree of how they use that selective favoritism? So you have, I keep bringing up a friend group because that's a perfect illustration about how you can have what would be the categorization of a relationship with several different people.
Yep.
But you also have that with strangers, where
And
you're,
this is why I wish they would go into more detail about these kind of things and actually explain it, because friend-based polyamory, family-based polyamory is not a problem to me, but romance-based polyamory is very much a problem to me because it's not the same thing. Like having multiple friends, okay, sure, whatever. Having multiple family members, okay, sure, whatever. But having multiple lovers seems very unfair.
well, who defines that?
Because again, like I brought up earlier, if you have multiple lovers, inevitably time is going to be taken away from another lover no matter how hard you try. Our time is very limited. We only have so much time to spend, so it is important to spend that time wisely.
But yeah, that's why we all spend time with each other. Like me, my girlfriend and her husband, we all spend time with each other in various degrees. Like sometimes he can't spend time with her, so I spend time with her, and there are times I can't spend time with her, so she spends time with him. You could actually make an argument how it's like even more efficient. Like we all understand how there are several moments where when it comes to multiple lovers we think about overlap, but that's assuming that everybody's fighting for that. We usually when it comes to a polyamorous relationship, especially one that needs to work, if you're all arguing with each other with time to spend with each other, there's obviously like a way deeper problem than something as simple as like I want to spend time. They're jealous.
Yep, and here's what I find funny. Going back to an argument Mag made, this was a really stupid point, and it actually connects to what you just said. She used the example of polyamory is better than monogamous relationships, and she actually does believe people who are in polyamorous relationships are better than people who are in monogamous relationships. And some people didn't take too kindly to the fact that she took a shot at those types of people.
Oh yeah,
But
she can have
yeah,
her wrong opinion. She can have her wrong opinion. Yeah.
and it's just very foolish to think that because like I brought up in my video, how the hell does having another person there help the two wives arguing? That actually makes the situation worse because the two wives have their own perspective. They're arguing about something. They're not agreeing. So inevitably, they're going to put pressure on the husband and demand that he take a side. And if he sides with the wrong one, the other one is going to get pissed off and there's going to be hostility. How does that make the situation better just because there's more people? This is the flaw with more logic. Like
Well,
just because
I can give you some insight in that because like obviously me and my girlfriend we argue. And so what happens is that, for example, me and my girlfriend argue, and then she talks about with her husband. But even though me and her are arguing, and this is very important, even though that me and her are arguing, she still makes sure to understand. And I recognize that she's like, I'm going to bring this up. Is it okay for me to bring this up? And if I say that this part is not okay to bring up, she won't bring it up. But she will talk to her husband about like, am I right in this? Am I wrong in this? It's like, what is the perspective here? Like, we trust enough. I don't put pressure on him to take my side. So that's why I have like part of the reason I wanted to come on here is because their version of a polyamorous relationship seems very integral. A very intrinsically tied to the fantasy of everybody just being the same, which is very much like kind of it's utopian.
oh yeah, and I hate utopian logic. And what's funny is they claim to be ANCAPs and libertarians, yet one of the basic bedrock principles of libertarian philosophy is individuality. Everyone is different. They're essentially taking away individuality from each other because they're so delusional.
It's more so they're tied up in justifying their own relationship. They're not taking time to have a richer conversation about what polyamory means. If you want to have a conversation about what polyamory means to you, that's totally fine. But when you try to conflate that with
if that was the case.
yeah, if you're conflating it with defining it, then we start having an issue because at that point I'm like, well, I'm a pretty quiet person that really just keeps to themselves, but I'll throw my hat in the ring just because I would like an interesting discussion to be have.
Yep, and that's what I want to do here. And what's sad is if if the girl Mag didn't have such a vague, unexplained hatred towards me for no reason and didn't spread lies about me to her lovers, which led to the husband hating me just because of what she said, which leads to me believing that the husband seems to take everything his lovers say at face value without actually getting any evidence of it. And I would have loved to have invite them all on the live stream to defend themselves. It could have been you and me versus them, and we could have seen what could have become of it, but that will probably never be the case. Even if I tried to reach out to them, they would say like, get away from us, you're a crazy obsessive stalker, like
Well,
seriously.
well, they already said, they already made it emphatically clear at the end of the video. Make a video response. If you got anything wrong, tell us what we got wrong. And
Which
like
is what
that's
I
all.
did.
Yeah, this is the whole reason why.
They get what they asked for. Like, if you leave yourself up for me to destroy you, then I'm going to do just that.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like Death Battle does the same thing. I have a reputation for constantly ripping Death Battle, new asshole. Some people say like, why even bother? You know they're not going to listen. Well, they flat out said, go ahead and make videos about us. We don't care. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep making videos about them until I get it through their thick skulls.
Fair enough. Okay, so not to get off track, is there anything else in the? Well, it's fine. I'm just making sure that we have some good structure to it. Is there anything else that you wanted in regards to critique the video?
Well, let's see. I'd have to think about it because I definitely had so much to say about the video. I probably could have kept that video going on much longer and still barely scratched the surface of the things I had to say to them. And I'm trying to remember like any other points. I think I already addressed the children point, but actually I did a little bit of research. There's an article in the description about this by a doctor that will probably know a little bit more about this stuff than I, Raccoon, or Scorch and Mag, that polyamorous relationships are actually extremely toxic and unhealthy for children. But Mag says that polyamorous relationships are better for kids. So she is blatantly spreading misinformation. And if anyone listens to her or she listens to her own logic and she really wants to be a mother, if she brings a child into that relationship, that child is going to be put in a toxic relationship and they're probably going to end up hating life.
All right.
Another example of I feel things being very unfair. Just imagine what that child is going to have to go through. The confusion. I mean, even just simply, like, for example, the lack of a parent. I can tell you this from experience. The lack of a parent in your life, only having one parent, can cause so much damage you have no idea.
Well, the thing is that yes, there is. Well, I mean, first off, that was kind of an appeal to authority. But aside from that,
Well, I wasn't trying to do an appeal to authority, although I do realize how that kind of came off as that. I'm just trying to say, like, this person is very knowledgeable on this subject. So if I can't speak on it as well as this doctor can, you can read the article where she goes into more detail about why it's toxic.
all right. Well, I mean, to be fair, my girlfriend is a doctor, so if we go by that logic, the thing is that, for example, us, like, of course, we're not going to show affection in front of the kids. Like, that's inappropriate, anyways. Like, for you to be overtly kind of like handsy with your partner in front of your kids. That's like, why? But in terms of polyamory, yes, when I'm sitting down with her and her twins are in the room, my focus is like, we're not going to be handsy and we're not going to be kissing and stuff because we don't want to confuse the kids. They're at such a developing stage that they need to imprint like very carefully, like who's mom and who's dad and how their relationship works. Like once the kids get older, then she's thinking about telling them about it. It depends on how relevant it is, because like honestly, who knows? Me and her may not even be together at a point where they're like, they won't maybe even remember me.
I just view it as way too risky because think about it this way. The reason why I brought up that example is if merely having one less parent can cause lifelong damage, like what happened to me because I had a dead father, not only did that fuck me up for life, but it made me apprehensive towards anyone who ever claims to be my father. Anyone who has ever claimed to be my dad, I had a natural animosity towards them, and I wouldn't like them. I would only ever pretend to like them within their own presence, but when they weren't around, I wouldn't give two shits and I would be very open about it. So imagine the kind of damage that multiple lovers is going to cause because now they don't know who is mommy or daddy. And what if like they decide that they're pissed off that they're not getting attention because of the child? Well, they'll just trick the child into saying, well, actually, I'm mommy, and it just causes all kinds of issues, and it's going to lead to a very fucked situation. And no matter how you look at it, that child is going to end up confused. You're putting that child in a very unfair situation. I'm sorry, but if you bring a child into that world, you are basically giving up some of your rights to an extent because you have a responsibility to that child.
Sure, but there's also the counterpoint of large families. So let's say you live in a large home with like nieces, nephews, grandfather, grandmother, father, son, mother, daughter. Like they're all in the big house together. Like that is an example of a large multi-relationship family working just perfectly fine, where people come out of it perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, if it was just like, oh, like she's just like a friend being added to the relationship. Like one thing I almost forgot about that I wanted to bring up that I found very interesting. You found Mag's wording to be very sketchy when she said the words, and I quote, I am not cheating. I was just simply added to the group. You found that wording to be very, very suspicious.
Yeah, because didn't make it seem like she had a choice. That's why it seems uncomfortable.
Yeah, but she just describes it as like a group. It's not like, oh, like we all love each other. It's just like we're all in a group. We're all the same person.
Well,
Like they
it's not
actually
even
say
that.
that would they come together to make one better person.
Well, it's not even that. She says like I was added, not I joined. Like there's no sense of agency to that. That's what
Yep.
makes it
And
entirely uncomfortable, is that because when they say that something was missing and then she's like I was added to the group, it does make it seem like she was treated like an object in that
yep,
reality.
that's what I was just gonna say. I was thinking that too. They seem to be objectifying her, and she either is like too stupid to know this, which she admits that she's not very smart, or she's so desperate for love she doesn't care. But here's what I find interesting:
This
when
is
they
getting
approached
conversation.
her, she was uncomfortable about this, but apparently somehow the wife talked her into it, which is very, very odd. And a lot of people in the comments were speculating that there's some kind of manipulation or power going on here that we're not seeing.
Again, like the thing, like I'm not going to go too much into her personal life regarding
Yeah,
that.
I mean, we can't. I mean, we can only speculate what's going on behind the scenes. We can only go off of what we actually know.
Like even then, it's like the definition of polyamory that most people work under is that it's consensual. Everybody knows we have an understanding of the relationships with other people that we share relationships with, and that's like what we're working underneath the frame under. And I don't know the details about their relationship in a way, but when it comes to like the video, um, it's unfortunate, but it's not entirely prevalent. Like I don't know her. If if uh, I'm trying to think of a way that I can be contacted, but she's probably not going to find out about this. But either way, it doesn't matter. If she does, she does. But if she doesn't, she doesn't.
If she does find out about this live stream, that'll be interesting. Hopefully,
You
me
can send her my way.
simply having this live stream won't enrage her, because my mere existence seems to piss her off for some reason. Again, vague, unexplained reasons as to why she hates me.
Okay, but the big point is, if she somehow finds about it, just point her in my direction, and me and her can have a civil conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. She won't listen to me anyway.
All right, so I think we've gone enough through the video, but I feel like I've.
So is there anything else you want to like personally add from your own perspective?
A lot of it has been put in. Like, I used a lot of examples of my own relationship to compare here, because I believe I have a healthy polyamorous relationship, and I use that as the example in this video, as in contrast to this video that we're critiquing. But I mean, like, no, I mean, for the most part, I would just have to ask if there's any questions that you have in front of these people that you would like to ask me about it.
Well, I do have a couple of questions I would have asked them had they not had personal gripes with me. And one of them was like, okay, so here's a question I have. Because one thing I find interesting, they say they came to an agreement as if they were signing some kind of contract. And one of my questions would be, I might even make a video about this, like a short little video called Questions I Have for Polyamorous People. One of them would be, do polyamorous people use contracts in the same way that people who engage in BDSM relationships have a contract with rules that they must follow?
Okay, so this more has to do with, a long time ago we talked about performity, and it's mainly a very technical term about actions that also do. So, for example, when you say I promise, you're not just saying you promise, you're doing the action of promising, right?
Oh yeah, because words mean nothing. Actions speak louder than words.
But there are certain words and actions that perform a greater meaning than just simple words or actions. So saying like I do at your wedding legally binds you into marriage. Saying I'm guilty at a courtroom actually gets you into a place where you're found guilty and whatever you're being tried for. So when it comes to saying that like they consented to the group and so forth and so on, it works into that dynamic. It's the same as saying, like, will you go out with me? It is the act of starting a relationship.
And speaking strictly from someone who is an anarchist, while I don't agree punishing people legally for this, and Shadow did say, like, let the government ban polyamory. Let's get this out of the way right now. Prohibition doesn't work, and it never will work. But even then, even if we take the legality out of it, which I think needs to be done, here's a very important thing I would say. This is why I want it to be more of a social thing. I want to punish people socially for it, not legally, because I think that's just jailing people for a victimless crime. I think there should always be a social stigma around it. I look at it from a more social, moral, and principle perspective. Again, I view it as cheating, so I say rather you look at it from the religious perspective or the legal perspective, you're wrong no matter what, because you are being morally unfair.
I mean, like, you just kind of described the witch hunts. It's like a social wrong that this, like, the society should take care of. That kind of seems like the witch trials to me. I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, I do see how it can come off that way, and that's not how I want it to be. I just want there to be some kind of like social stigma around certain things like abortion and polyamory. So not necessarily to prevent them from doing so, but maybe a certain amount of shame will prevent them from doing it, because I actually think that shame can be good to an extent. Because if you receive shame, it usually makes you want to do something to better yourself, as long as it's the right kind of shame, not the malicious kind. which is why I said in my video at the end, I hope the hammer of shame gets brought down on these two. Maybe it'll make them come to their senses.
Well, there is a social structure that does that, and that's Japan. And they have
Japan is a very socially structured thing, which is why I admire Japan, because for the most part, they do things socially rather than legally through the gun of the state.
Well, yeah, but that's also why they have probably the least people getting married. They have a declining birth rate, and then they also have like the highest suicide rate. That's like their people are miserable to an extent in their individuality.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it needs to be done in the right way. Japan oftentimes has the right idea of things, but don't always execute it the best way. This is why I think we should learn from Japan. Like, Japan has the right idea, just do it right.
Of all
I don't think that's too unreasonable.
Chill. Of all the ethno states, they're pretty chill. They're pretty chill ethno state. But okay, fair enough. But and you know what? If anybody still comes away from this believing that polyamory is still wrong, like I said, if you want me to, I can send you a way to contact me, and we can have a conversation about it.
Yes, I'll absolutely leave the link to your Twitter to anyone who wants to have a personal conversation with him, and I might possibly consider bringing you on more often. Also, I'll leave a link to my Discord, so anyone who's in my Discord can also communicate with you.
Yeah, if you want to talk to me better about it, if you just want to get off your chest and say I'm a piece of shit for doing polyamory, that's fine. No one else's opinion is going to really change how I live my life. But it's if you genuinely just want to get something off your chest, I'm willing to have a conversation about that. I'm totally fine with that. I just want to say that before asking you again if there's any other questions that you have about polyamory that I can clear up.
I mean, I guess another question I have would be, are you allowed to have kids, or are you forbidden from having kids for reasons like what we just talked about how poly is very toxic for the children?
Well, I mean, like, you would have to say, like, are you talking about a triad like they have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about like one person in the relationship decides to have sex and a child ends up being a result of this. Well, what happens then is that against the agreement, as the wife puts it? If so, how does that work? So are you prevented from having children? Or if you do have children, do you add more to the agreement? And it goes back to my argument of why I asked, like, do these situations, are they very similar to a BDSM relationship where a contract and rules and regulations are established for the safety of the relationship because of what BDSM people engage in? Now, sure, polyamory is nowhere near as dangerous as BDSM, so there's a logical reason for them to have a contract. But I'm curious, is there like a similar sort of like contract or even a social contract that has certain rules that you all must abide by? And if so, is one of those rules no children?
Well, no, like, usually what would be okay to do in the group would be discussed between the people in the group. Like, the main thing is that anybody in the polyamorous relationship and the extent of it, like, for example, definitionally, I'm not in a polyamorous relationship, but my girlfriend is in one with me. But we still all have conversations equally about it because, like, it's about how we balance things and how we give each other like respect and time. So when it comes to something like kids, you can make an argument about like, well, there are things such as like midwives, and there are such things as like other structures that aren't just like the same wife, like, but just like in a, well, it's a different woman, but it's the same kind of position as a wife. You could make a lot of arguments for that, but generally, like, honestly, that's just up to the people in the relationship. Like I don't have a say so in if my girlfriend who's with her husband gets a kid or not. Like, it's I can't do that. It's like, she's gonna be over in another state taking care of a kid, and I'm just like, yep, that's what I wanted. Like that would be ridiculous. like it depends on like the nature of things. So of course, like if I lived with her and if I'm the one who impregnated her, then I think we should have a conversation about it. I'm not saying that I get to decide. I'm saying that I want to talk to her about it. But when it comes to those situations, like generally you just kind of follow the same rhetoric as like normal. Like women should be able to do what they want with their body, but like, if you don't want to have kids, then don't have kids. And it's just, if somebody in the relationship does want to have a child, then if the whole group doesn't want to have kids, then they're perfectly fine with leaving. Like, it's all about consent. It's all about talking. It's all about getting on the same page. So it's a very nuanced conversation to be had when it comes to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess that's the case. I guess the only other question I would have is going back in regards to the kid. If the person in the polyamorous relationship decides they're done with the relationship, are they allowed to take the kid that is not biologically theirs with them? And if so, doesn't that kind of show of what I'm talking about, of why polyamory is unfair and fucked up, if that's even allowed?
Well, that is like, in good faith, that is a good conversation to have, because kind of like with the movie Big Daddy, like that obviously wasn't his kid, but he grew into a whole different perspective of life just by seeing that guy as his biological father. But then he went off and like he had like a regular family. So there is a discussion to be had about, it has less to do with that and more like what is best for the child, and that's a very hard discussion to have. I would say that what the child would want. Honestly,
To me, it sounds like once the child comes into the picture in the polyamorous relationship, they have all the power at that point.
I mean, yeah, of course, like every parent, doesn't matter if you're just like a single parent or you're just a husband and wife or you're a husband and like 5 wives, you're going to give extra time to the child. Now, me personally, I believe that you should always build a relationship on prioritizing your significant others before the children, personally, because I mean, you had kids together based off your relationship. I'm not saying neglect your children. I'm saying like, if you had to choose between making your child happy for like a day or like your wife happy for a day, like you'd obviously pick your wife, because like your wife could make your kids happy. It's just like it works out.
And this goes back to why I say it's an impossible expectation to bring equal love and balance into the situation, because once you get kids involved, you have even less time to spend with your significant others. And if you have more than one, well, how do you do it? This is why, to me, it seems like it would make far more sense to just have one lover, rather than thinking you can have more than one lover and love multiple lovers, multiple children, and multiple family members at the same time. It's just damn near impossible. And from my perspective, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Well, I mean, like an example being is like when I got to meet my girlfriend's children, we all played arts and crafts. So it was like, it was time that we shared together, and it wasn't that we took away. It was like something that we all got to join into. It has less to do with like who's being neglected, because if you look at it from that angle, like every single relationship that has ever existed has somebody that has been neglected at some point. And focusing on that is kind of like, we need to balance out every single moment of like my affection that I have for you in this time that's genuine. Oh, I have to balance that out, because even though the kids are asleep right now, they need extra attention in the morning. It's not really the same area. It's not even quantifiable. It goes into this more interesting dynamic of our relationships with one another, because like I said, I got to spend time with her and her kids, and we weren't like outwardly affectionate where they would confuse me and her in being a relationship. I was just seen as a friend of the family, and we all had a really good time, and the children like got plenty of attention, and everything was really calm in that kind of circumstance. So nobody was neglected, and just because me and her couldn't like show affection towards each other, like that didn't diminish, that didn't feel like we didn't get to spend time with each other. We got to spend time with each other in a different dynamic.
And speaking from even just simply my own perspective, I think that neglect is the worst possible thing that you can subject someone you love to. And to me, the fact that polyamory can even lead to a possibility of neglect for even one partner, to me, comes off as unfair, which is why it's far more realistic to just have one lover. Because from my perspective, you might disagree with this, I would much rather be in a situation where me and my lover are constantly screaming at each other rather than being in a position where my lover is neglecting me.
Every relationship neglects their partner. Like that's inevitable. Like it's not it most of the time it's not even intentional. It's just like, oh, I didn't know I didn't know that like I wasn't doing this right. Like my girlfriend is messaging me, and she told me that, like, for example, like she had been neglected as a child, and to a point where it was like very, very abusive. But that doesn't mean that like inherently like that's going to be passed on or that's going to affect her relationships way later on. Like I have a very loving relationship with her. Like every relationship to a degree is going to incorporate some form of neglect, and there are some very bad versions of it, like what my girlfriend went through. And from what I've heard of you in this conversation, what you have experienced. But every relationship does that. Those are the moments where we turn to our significant other and say, like, you really hurt me today, and that felt really bad. And the main thing you want to reach to them is some kind of understanding. Every relationship goes through that. The area is how we treat each other in face of that neglect, I would say, would be the more important conversation to be had with that.
Yep, absolutely. And I hate to have to cut it off here, but I think I'm going to cut it off here and we'll just close out because I just got a message from someone and there's something really concerning and I really need to get to it ASAP. So I guess we can just finish up here.
I mean, like, I think we fleshed out everything, unless there's anything else you want to bring up. Like, I brought up everything I want to bring up.
Yep, and I think for the most part, I've gotten it all out. So I hope you all enjoyed this live stream. And if you do enjoy me live streaming, let me know. And I could consider actually doing live streaming far more often for like different topics that I'm not able to go in as much depth as I would like to on a YouTube video, or I can set up things like Q&As because I'm sure some of you are probably curious that don't personally talk to me privately about learning more about me. So if you do enjoy this, let me know and I'll definitely do it a lot more often. And it was nice having you here.
It was fun. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. I hope the audience enjoyed having me here.
And if anyone wants to be on a live stream with me, rather it's a debate or just wanting to talk about something, let me know, or hell, even donate to my Patreon, and I would be perfectly happy with setting up special live streams like this, somewhere we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. So just let me know if you ever want to be on a live stream. I'll make it happen.
Glad to hear you liked having me. I really appreciated being on. It was a good time.
Yep, it was. And with that, I'll see you guys around for my next video. You all have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.